Welcome to Infectious Disease Lesson 3.2, Reservoirs and Vectors, Lyme Disease and Malaria. The goals of this lesson are to introduce the concept of reservoirs and vectors, and to explore reservoirs and vectors by looking at the life cycles of two socially important diseases, malaria and Lyme disease. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to explain the role of reservoirs in pathogens' life cycles, explain the role of vectors in pathogens' life cycles, and describe the preventative measures used to limit infectious spread of Lyme disease and malaria. We'll achieve these goals with a discussion about how pathogens enter a host, which includes defining reservoirs and vectors, and with a jigsaw activity that explores the role of reservoirs and vectors in the life cycles of two important diseases, Lyme disease and malaria. To prepare for this lesson, you'll need to review the following key scientific concepts. Pathogens can have complex life cycles with multiple hosts, and understanding the life cycles of pathogens, including reservoirs and vectors, can help to prevent, diagnose, and treat disease. You can review this scientific content in the background reading provided for you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in this lesson. The teacher manual or lesson plan provides a minute-by-minute explanation of the lesson structure, and the student workbook provides additional explanation for students. Note that an annotated version is also available for teachers. Be sure to print the lesson worksheet and the jigsaw reading on Lyme disease and malaria. The key points of the lessons due now are to review routes that pathogens take to gain access to a host and to define the terms reservoir and vector. The due now begins by reviewing some of the routes that pathogens might take to gain access to a host. This might include breathing contaminated air with water droplets from coughing and sneezing, exchange of bodily fluids, contact with broken or damaged skin, consuming contaminated water or food, contact with contaminated belongings, or transmission from mother to infant during pregnancy or delivery. Another way that a pathogen may gain access to a host is by traveling in a vector from a reservoir to a new host. It is important that students are familiar with these terms before proceeding to the jigsaw activity. The key points of the activity are that malaria and Lyme disease are caused by pathogens that have complex life cycles with reservoirs and vectors, and the life cycles relate to how we prevent, diagnose, and treat disease. In this jigsaw activity, the students will be learning about the life cycles of the pathogens that cause malaria, which is caused by a single-celled parasite called Plasmodium, and Lyme disease, which is caused by a bacterium called Borrelia burgdorferi. For the jigsaw, have students break into groups of 4 to 6 to work through the reading and to fill in the table in their worksheets. Later, they will use this table to teach their classmates about their topic. For both malaria and Lyme disease, the students will focus on 8 key aspects of the disease: the infectious agent, prevalence, vector and reservoir, life cycle, symptoms, diagnosis, treatments, and public health issues and prevention. It's important to note that to fit the jigsaw into a single class period, you may want to divide the work within or between groups. Once the students have completed their sections of the worksheets, it's time for them to teach their classmates. This can be done through a whole class teach-back or in small groups by rotating students so there is an expert on each topic in every table. After the students have had an opportunity to complete their worksheets, walk them through the life cycles of malaria and Lyme disease to review the key points. The key point of the lesson's wrap-up is that knowing the life cycles of Plasmodium and Borrelia can help us to prevent, diagnose, and treat disease. We'll get there by considering the following 2 questions. What advice would you give to someone walking in grassy fields, and what advice would you give to someone traveling to the tropics? The key point of the lesson's homework is to review the life cycles of malaria and Lyme disease. We'll get there by having students complete the worksheet, if needed, and by writing 2 short paragraphs describing the life cycle of the pathogen they chose for their final project. One of the most common questions students ask is, can a human be a vector? When researchers talk about vectors, they are often referring to insects. However, a vector can be any living creature that transmits an infectious agent to humans. Another question students ask is, can a vector be a reservoir? A reservoir is where an infectious agent normally lives, and without it, the infectious agent would die out. So, if humans are required for the agent's life cycle, we are acting like reservoirs. At the beginning of the next lesson, collect the lesson worksheets to assess each student's explanation of the roles that vectors and reservoirs play in pathogen life cycles. This lesson introduced the concept of a pathogen's life cycle. In the next unit, we will turn our focus to how a pathogen's life cycle causes disease. Don't forget, if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members and we'll be happy to help you.